You are listening to The Black Landscape with Andrea Spearman, where Black excellence is always trending. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Andrea Spearman, and this is The Black Landscape, where we engage with emerging and established Black leaders here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts or in the comments of our social media. I am a light-skinned Black woman with my dark brown curly hair wrapped up in a head wrap today. It's Black and it also has a pattern of green, blue, red, and yellow flakes, circles, spots, whatever they be, they up in there. Today I'm wearing a heather gray t-shirt that reads in orange and green letters, Bay Area Dance Week. So we're here with special guests, Gabriele and Chibueze, known together as Oysterknife. Woo!
Yeah.
Please describe yourselves to the people.
Okay. Hi. So I'm Gabriele Christian.
Excuse me.
Okay. It's okay. Gabriele. Yes, Gabriele Christian. I'm wearing a black hat that says the Apollo on it, which is where I'm from Harlem. So just gives you a sense of where I'm from. I got gold earrings from my grandma. I've got my scraggly beard and mustache and goatee going on. I'm a black genderqueer person with locks down to my chin, basically, that are under the hat. A brown jacket and a black and white kind of like boxing martial arts outfit, I guess you call it. With a V-neck. Mm-hmm. Striped.
Hit us with your best shot.
And I'm Chibueze. I am a light-skinned Black queer person with a lavender-colored beanie that I'm hiding my messy hair under today, which is partially dyed blonde with dark roots growing out. Unfortunately, you can't see it today, but it is there. I'm wearing all black pants, a black sweatshirt from Glide Church that says love in the front. And I have no earrings and no jewelry today. I'm dressed down very casually. Oh, JK, but I do have a septum piercing, a small septum piercing in my nose.
We both have
nice.
We do, yeah. Gabe has a nose ring too.
Okay, that's us.
Come on, matching.
Twins.
Welcome. Let's give the audience a brief background of who you are individually. Chibueze first. Let's talk about where you grew up and how you became a movement artist.
Ooh, okay. Wow. Well, that's a story. Well, I grew up in Connecticut in a suburb outside of New York City called Danbury, D Block. Woo. And yeah, I grew up, doing a lot of theater. Actually, that was where I started out, doing a lot of theater, choir, singing. And once I got to college, I continued to do that. I did a cappella. I continued to do theater. I didn't really do much dance. And when I graduated, same thing. I worked for some theater companies. I worked in the Caribbean at Trinidad Theater Workshop for a year, doing theater, learning about masquerade, learning about a lot of Black and like non-American theater, which was really exciting. And then when I came back after doing my fellowship there for a year, I was living in New Haven at the time, working on an arts festival, hating my life, doing a full-time job. So I felt, I didn't have enough time really to do the theater like I wanted to. I was doing some local theater, but it was not really fulfilling me in the ways I wanted. And before I had gone to Trinidad, Gabe had moved to the Bay Area. And Gabe was doing, at first, a lot of theater stuff, experimental theater, which looked really cool to me. And I was like, that's where I want to be. That experimental theater looks like the kind of stuff I want to do. I don't really want to do Broadway in New York. I don't really want to do that kind of thing. I want to do something a little more edgy. Exactly. I'm not about the jazz hands. It's not really me. So
You're not?
Exactly. So then I applied to a job that brought me to the Bay Area. It was like an AmeriCorps job. And I promptly quit that within like 3 months because I was like, this is not what I'm here to do. It was just kind of a vehicle to get me here. And again, it was like a full-time job. So it didn't really allow me space to pursue my arts practice like I wanted at the time. And I started acting locally in a lot of regional plays in the Bay Area. And, it was cool. There's a lot of exciting theater that happens out here. But I also got pretty quickly frustrated with the ways that as an actor, there was only so much creative power I had in the space. it felt like often I was just, fulfilling directors' dreams and wishes, which is, of course, what an actor does. But for me as an artist, I really wanted more directorial control. I wanted more creative control. And as someone who acts, but I also write, I sing, I do video art. I became very interested in masquerade in Trinidad and started doing more ritual theater exploration. As someone with all those other skill sets, I was like, I want to do more. Like, I don't want to just act. I also want to bring all these other things that I do into my work. And so around the end of 2017, I was still doing acting, but I was just like, bored of it. Gabe and I decided to join forces and apply to it was kind of like a fellowship with Queer Cultural Center. So for their National Queer Arts Festival in 2018. And so we decided to join forces and make like an experimental duo together and make an experimental show that involved all the different things that we do. Gabe is also a multi-talented artist who will share more about the things they do. And that was the birth of Oysterknife, basically. And that was what brought me into movement work, because by that point, I was very much a social dancer, loved going to dance and stuff like that. But I wasn't trained in dance or anything like that. And by that point, by the time we started doing Oysterknife, Gabe was getting into more dance and experimental, that kind of thing, experimental dance. So yeah, that was what really became the birth of our company and became my entrance into the dance world. And I very much learned by fire, I guess, or learned through experience and like doing our shows together, starting to take a little more dance classes. And eventually that segued into me not only making work with Oysterknife over the years, but I started working with people like Bandaloop, first as a vocalist and then partially as like a vocalist dancer. And then, it just kind of bloomed from there. And so now I guess you can say it feels weird sometimes to say it because I still feel like there's so many things I do. But yeah, part of my practice is being a movement artist. And I feel like it's been a very non-linear trajectory, but it brought me to Oysterknife, and it's been really fulfilling to have a platform where I can just kind of express all the things that I want to do creatively. And also, with Oysterknife, part of the reason we made it is so that we could kind of make performance about the subjects that are most interesting to us and that are not necessarily solely linked to our identity as Black queer artists, or that allow us to subvert that kind of subject matter in the ways that feel autonomous to us. So we'll talk more about that, as we go on, because, that's about us.
Yes. Right. Yeah. You're getting too deep already. Slow down.
I can tell. But yeah, so that's how I got to where I am now, which is, interdisciplinary artist, making, theater, making dance, making film, writing, all the things, singing. Yeah.
Yeah. And, for people who don't know, movement is not necessarily just all about dance, because in theater, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of embodiment of your whole person.
Absolutely.
So you was moving in a different way before you got with the dancers.
It's true. Yeah. And I think that's what kind of helped with that transition a little bit. I wasn't unfamiliar with, embodied performance. So it really helped.
Gabriele Christian. I haven't always been Gabriele Christian, so I understand the mistakes. It's one of those things where my name has changed probably 3 times since I've been in the Bay Area. Yeah. I'm getting more. Yes. But I'm from New York. I'm from Harlem, as I mentioned earlier, with my Apollo hat, very close to the suburb of Danbury.
Actually,
outside the outskirts of the suburb of Danbury. And I started off. I was actually raised, in Harlem for 18 years and went to school there, and was also an actor and a young actor doing theater for a while as a high school kid. But I also, in my household, had people in my family who were dancers. So I would say my journey actually begins with these folks who took me to school, who used to live with my mom and I. My mom was a single mom in Harlem. She was working all the time, so she had people live in the apartment for cheaper rent to take me to school, and they were all dancers. So we would have rehearsals in our apartment, in our living room. That's kind of where I feel like I would say, like, I started seeing what it is to be a movement artist. And then the flash forward, till college. Was also a theater major. I was a theater major in Chibueze. It wasn't, but we met in the theater.
We actually met in college.
Yeah, we met in college like 13, 14 years ago now. So I was a full-fledged theater studies artist. I was working, with the folks from drama school, art school. I was really undergraduate, like looking for anything I could get my hands on and not really getting cast, but I wanted to get cast. Like Chibueze mentioned earlier, there's a way that theater was really casting me in these like creature, monster, like these like weird character roles that weren't how I felt inside. That started me sort of being over theater. I had one fun show I did with someone named Robert Woodruff, who's been a mentor forever at the Yale Rep. My first theater credit. Moved to the Bay Area kind of on a whim because I had friends who had found a place here. I had no reason to be here. I just showed up. I literally showed up and I was like, oh shit, I don't have any money. I had to be a barista immediately. I had one dramaturging gig with We Players, which did a show at Sutro Baths. And then that was my first time seeing theater and dance being done in an immersive sort of way that I think also informs a lot of how we work. I was like, dude, as a bit actor, as a dramaturg, but I was like, oh, you actually can do this too. It's not just this or that. The Bay really is dance theater as a concept. I think there's so many folks that we've worked with in our time. And I think, as I've gone along doing theater, I started dropping theater and doing more dance theater and then more dance. That's kind of how it went. The dance theater, I just mentioned, like people like Joe Good kind of cast me early on in my dance career. Jess Curtis, Anne Blethenthal at Skywatchers. And and so these are all folks who kind of, I think, informed the community engaged, like not necessarily like concert dance, but like dance that's really built around the community and what we need as a body of folks in the work, and not trying to be technically precise all the time, but actually being more about the spirit or the soul of the work. That's kind of informed how I think about dance. And of course from there, just like all these other, I'd say the real thing that got me into the scene, the experimental scene here, was, used to go by Randy Reyes. Now it's Reyes Supernova, someone who cast me in this thing called List This, Desaparecidas. That collective really just is still a lot of my good friends. Most of them are my good friends still, and we still make work together in different capacities. There's also something called Rupture now that is kind of it stems off of List This, and that's all Black improvisers. So I think really improvisation is what I've been naming as my practice, along with other interdisciplinary forms of extemporaneous art making and speech and songs. Speech, song, text, poetry. And it runs the gamut because we are, we were for a while. We're better paid artists now, but we were underpaid artists for a while. And in
listen,
in the underpaid artist category, you got to do everything: produce, housemate, etc.
So that's how we became multimedia
precisely
artists.
Because of necessity. So that's the journey, and here we are. 2024, 7 years later from Oysterknife being made.
That's crazy. 7 years later from Oysterknife, and 14 years later from our
Wild. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Aw. So y'all met when y'all were just fetuses at the college.
Literally.
Dangling, yes.
Intertwined.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny. There's a few of you, the East Coast people, that have wandered your way on over here, and now you done stayed and loved it and living and learning. I talked to several people who just on a whim came to the Bay Area, and I'm like, well, welcome. We appreciate you. As long as you're bringing, culture, talent, and your hard work. That's what I love. I feel like so many wonderfully talented people have made their way to the Bay Area and made it their home.
Totally.
Exactly. Yep.
Totally.
Yep,
I mean, we made a show. I'll just drop this. We made a show with Joe Good like 3 years ago called Time of Change, all about how people move to the Bay Area, how they hate Ashbury to be a Black or working class neighborhood. And I think we were talking about that in our lives. We kind of came here on this like the same kind of mythic whim, like the Bay is full of radical potential Black Panthers, like hippie, like all these things felt like they were drawing us here. Yeah. And so I think that's really why we're here.
The Bay is a special place. I think there's a reason that so many significant cultural and creative movements have come out of here. And I think we're, like Gabe was saying, we're like a part of that history in that way. Yeah, we are.
Yeah. And I was not surprised to hear that y'all are from East Coast, New York, that kind of area. I said I knew it was something different about y'all. Y'all got that East Coast energy. That's what it was. I said they not originally from here.
No.
I said they got that East Coast energy, that New York energy.
The hustle.
They different.
Yeah, hustle is that quick energy.
It's true.
That
explains a lot.
It does.
Okay, anyway.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. The people who in my mind, I'm like, there's something different. And then they end up, oh yeah, I was originally from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. I'm like, there you go.
That's what it is. It's so condensed that you got to get out. It's a high pressure environment. You got to get out, and that's how we find ourselves cast away. So
I think the free range aspect of the Bay, like culturally and creatively, is kind of what drew us. It's like anything goes, and you're really encouraged to explore multiple mediums in a way that I think places like LA or New York
don't really have.
It's not the same. It's like it happens, but I don't think it's nearly as encouraged as it is here in the Bay, and just the radical risk taking that people do here as artists. I think
this is practically a suburb. It's like 1 million people only in the Bay, in SF or whatever. It's like it's coming from New York, which is like so full. You're kind of stuck with consistently dealing with other there's always the collision,
Yes,
and here you have a moment to take a break, to escape, and to be able to think what you actually want for yourself in a way that I don't have in New York when I was living there as an artist.
And I think the smallness, the fact that it is regionally smaller, it encourages that as well, because it's like you get to know people a lot more easily, and you get to find like-minded people, and I think that's different than when you're in a much bigger city where it's hard to find your people, your tribe, your kin. So.
Well, we are glad that you have found us and we found you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you already shared, where you all met. But what the heck is an oyster knife? and why? Like,
and why? I love it. That's what's been on everyone's mind for 7 years. What the hell?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to just name the quotes.
Okay, you go first.
And then we'll go. Yeah. So I'll just say there's a quotation. We'll just open this with a quotation that we always say. It's Zora Neale Hurston. She says, "No, I do not weep at the worries of the world. I'm too busy sharpening my oyster knife."
And this was in her essay, How It Feels to Be Colored Me, which is one of her more famous essays. And essentially the whole essay was about her rejecting the stereotype of the tragic Negro, or of the, Black suffering being the only thing that Black people have to talk about as artists, as people. This idea that we can move beyond those stereotypes and talk about the things that we care about. And also, the world is our pearl. We're sharpening our oyster knife. Everything is ours. Like, we don't have to just limit ourselves to a certain, topic or certain kinds of stories. And so that was why we called it Oyster Knife, because we vibe with that. We want to talk about, more than just our identities, or we want to expand the idea of what Blackness and queerness can even be.
Yeah. So, plus Zora, is such actually her birthday is tomorrow.
Yes.
On the 7th. Her transition date is the 28th of January. And we actually have this series right now called Black Benedictions, which is definitely kind of aligning with each Sunday in January. And it happens to fall on both of her birth and transition day. But she's such an inspiration. Really, Chibueze, they brought them to me. I didn't really know Zora's work as well until a few years ago. And the fact that Zora being an ethnographer, sort of folklorist, playwright, perform all these things.
She was a voodoo practitioner, she was a dancer, she was an actor, she was a multimedia artist.
Kind of like bridging across the world of what we do naturally, it felt like a good sort of model to have in how we dictate our work to the world. This is actually coming through the filter, the lens of this, amazing person who was, of course, discovered after her death as well. Like Alice Walker bringing her back, kind of excavating her.
Who was also based in the Bay.
Yes, so it all made sense. Like somehow these things connected to give us a place of center, a place to return to as we our work in a certain way that wasn't just our names.
Yeah, and so that's why Oyster Knife. It just felt appropriate. Yeah.
Keeps us.
Yes, I love that. Oh, I'm so invested in that. It's like, don't relegate us to these sad, tragic stories. We're so much more than that. Exactly. So much more beyond the scope of what folks want us to be.
Yeah, exactly. We very much reject, I think, like the white gaze that, pins us to the wall in a certain way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to circle back to that, of that white lens and white gaze, because I'll tell the story later on. We come back from the break about how I first saw you all, or how I was introduced to you. I don't know if that was your first show together, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But Oyster Knife it's a choice. I love it. I love that it extends from this dynamic boss of a woman. How is the Black queer centered in your work? What does that mean? And why do you spell it BLAQ?
Well, you can talk about that.
Yeah. That's definitely one of my poetic impulses. I mean, in some ways I think it's a shorthand, and in some ways it's a really like center that both of these things they're indecipherable from each other. Like my Black queerness, my queer Blackness, they're not separate. My Blackness informs it and is totally built by my queerness and vice versa, right? And I was born also into both. I didn't claim or choose any of them. They were bestowed upon me, right? And so I find those things, of course, the way that, as queer people, we go through perhaps a linguistic transition from like bisexual, bicurious, maybe. Sometimes, sometimes people go to gay, so that's the journey that people have taken back in the 90s at least. I think now, queerness is a useful umbrella, useful space to sort of pour into, and also Black with the BLAQ is a useful place to pour into. And I think for us, we've been using Black because it just keeps it all together. It's really one thing. We're not talking about Black ink, we're talking about Black. And Black, it still sounds like a thing that we that we are working with.
And it's too much to be like BIPOC, LGBTQ+.
Yeah.
Like, I love the acronyms in terms of everyone, but it just takes up too much space.
Yeah, exactly. We got too many things to write and say.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it. We're Black, and if you read it, you get the cue and you understand what's actually happening. Exactly. So it's sort of also underneath, at all times.
Yeah.
And it's block. Block.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, I very much agree with Gabe. I feel like I see my Blackness and my queerness as inextricably linked. And I think, especially as an actor, you're asked to kind of be a chameleon and be all kinds of different things. And sometimes that requires downplaying some of those aspects about yourself. And I think the beauty of Oysterknife and the work that we do is that those things can take center stage and are allowed to shine. And it's also a really key part of the kind of people we bring into our work as collaborators, as the kind of audiences that we reach out to.
Yeah.
And I think, Black queer people are at the center of everything we do because it is who we are. And they're also, the communities that are often the least seen or the least recognized, in their fullness. So I think for us, we're always about just articulating the fullness, the possibility, the infinity of these identities and how it's never any one thing. And it's, it's beyond, just the stereotype of either category. It's a very broad thing.
Yeah.
And I think, our work is about, defining that, expanding upon that, sharing that.
And in some ways, it's like, we have to keep on inventing new language. So,
exactly.
And
also, Black is part of that.
Yeah, there also wasn't queer for a while being used by people that we consider ancestors, even people like Zora, like James Baldwin, people that we admire. They didn't use the word queer for themselves. So a lot of our work.
Zora wasn't queer.
Zora wasn't queer.
Yeah, but you're right. But back then it was considered a slur.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a way that I think in these moments, thinking about like how we are also like not revisionists, but we are like trying to like sort of reintegrate
and reclaim
histories that we know are part of what made us possible. And so Black is a way to cage or to sort of like look back. It's another sort of, it's like a Sankofic, like looking back. It's a way to look back and try to assign a familiarity to things that we know have informed us before we even had the word queer for ourselves. So I was going to say, we're recording this from Black Yard, thinking of Black, BLAQ.
Yes.
Which is a place that we moved into like 6 years ago. And
in December 2017.
Yes. And then we decided to name it Black Yard because it was all Black queer artists in 2020.
Yes, it became that way.
And so, so we kind of, we also are constantly like using, like Blackness is constantly in our daily life also.
BLAQNES, Blackness.
Blackness with a Q.
Blockness. Yeah, Black Yard. It started out as a tenants union during 2020 when everyone was rent striking. We organized with our neighbors to do a rent strike and to get some repairs done on our house and stuff like that because our landlord owns our neighbors' houses as well. And then, like Gabe said, once it became an all Black queer household, because at first, it wasn't all Black queer at first, but by 2020 it was. We decided to formalize it into a collective and also a community hub, an artist space, an arts space.
A home for Oysterknife in this way.
And a home for Oysterknife in a way. And so it's a space that we really encourage the community to come and do whatever work they want to do in the space. And it's like a cheap or free place, especially in the East Bay where there's not a lot of venues to do that kind of stuff in East Oakland. And thanks to our new roommates, Dan and B, we've also expanded to do a lot more healing arts events and that kind of thing, social events for Black queer people. So
that was Dan you just heard.
Yeah, that was Dan who you heard. That was one of the members of Black Yard. We have a lot of different members of Black Yard who have come through this space, and this is our current iteration. So as Gabe was saying, Blackness, BLAQNES, is something that's not just part of our art practice, it's also part of our daily lives and where we live, and it's part of how we organize, and it's in every aspect of our lives. It's not, you can't separate it from our practice or our personal lives.
And there's like, I guess one thing that's also just the last thing I'll say is that Blackness with a Q, and also in pop culture and media always looks a certain way, always has a certain pomp to it or a certain tragedy to it, or campiness. And I love to see characters like in P-Valley, or I love to see these shows where there are like really amazing representations, but in some ways it also really pigeonholes us in a certain way. We're not that kind of Black, we're a different kind of Black. And so if we just say we're forfeiting Black work, people have to question, this work doesn't look like that representation of Blackness I've been seeing. This actually is just two people who identify as Black making a whole different kind of world for themselves. And I hope that that's kind of what we leave folks with the way that we show.
And to remember that there's space for all of it too.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all there. It's not just that. It's not just this.
Exactly. For all these different iterations of Black queerness.
Exactly. That's part of it.
We want to validate all of it.
Absolutely. There's space for all. Because there is no table. It's a Black Yard.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, Andrea said, "Where's my? I need my
theory."
our pitch. That's our pitch for our future grant.
Screw the table. There's no table. We're not getting a seat at the table. We have a full open backyard.
We got blankets.
Exactly.
We got grills. We got pillows. Don't worry about it. Yeah, you should come over sometime.
Please, we would love for you to come over. Yeah,
I would love to. And right now, before we take a break, we have a new segment called Bay Area Top 3. These are like favorite Bay Area people, places, things you love. And right now, I would love for you all to give me your top 3 Bay Area institutions, since now we're talking about institutions.
Institutions. Okay. Wow. Oh, jeez, that's hard. Okay.
And they can be places that have supported you or places you just like to go and be yourself and see yourself as well.
Okay. I'm going to say, this might be kind of random. Well, one I will say is, in terms of theater stuff, one institution I really admire is Camposanto. They do incredible theater. All of it is usually original work or original adaptations of canon, but honestly, it's mostly new work. They have really innovative directors. Some of the best theater I've seen has come from Camposanto, and they also really focus on POC, queer people, uplifting the voices that you don't normally see in theater. So Camposanto, if you want to see a theater show, if you ever see anything that they're doing, run, don't walk, go to the shows. Another institution that is really important to me is one that we recently started getting involved with because of our upcoming show is St. John Coltrane Spiritual Community. It's a church, a global community, excuse me. It's a church that was founded in the Haiti in, I think, 1967 or 68, a little after John Coltrane's death. It was a Black family who they saw him in concert and were just so inspired by his work. They came to understand that they believed his music was anointed sound and that he was a messenger brought here on earth to share the spiritual power of music and the uplifting power of music. And so they literally formed a church in his name and have been going for 40 years now? 50 years at least. And the family is still part of the church. Their children help run the church. And basically their church sessions, they talk about God and they talk about love, but it's very much a radical message of everyone is welcome here kind of thing. But they're basically just jazz jam sessions, which is incredible. Every time you go, they just play John Coltrane's music. There's usually a musician who comes or a singer who comes. And it's an incredible way to celebrate church with a focus on Black music and Black jazz music, which is Black classical music. So that's a really exciting space that we started working with recently. And then the last org, I'll say, this might feel a little random, but I want to shout them out because I really love the work they do, is Bridge Live Arts. They're not necessarily focused solely on queerness or Blackness, but I think as a dance institution, I really respect what they do in terms of talking the talk and walking the walk and really investing in community, really asking how do we dismantle white supremacy? How do we dismantle hierarchical power structures and capitalist mindsets of urgency? How do we actually practice distributed leadership in a transparent way? And, Hope Moore, who used to be called Hope Moore Dance, I really respect the way she, as a white dance leader, has been how do I decenter myself? How do I make this about something that's bigger than me? What does it look like to gracefully transition from a named dance org that's about my work to something that's about the community? And so I just feel like they don't get enough credit for the work that they're doing. I think it's really radical, and I think a lot of other dance institutions could take note. And they also have supported me. And they've definitely supported my work as Performance Primers, which is an emerging artist showcase that I help co-curate, and they've supported a lot of other dope artists doing community work. So Bridge Live Arts, love them. I want to see more of other dance institutions, replicating the kind of work they do. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good list. I'll add, because I feel like I don't think I have any additional ones. I think those are a great top
No,
3.
You gotta say 3.
No, I think I don't have 3 more. Those are probably the best 3. But I'll say I have to add, for the sake, I think we have to add Counterpost, of course.
Sure, yes.
Because Counterpost are the folks who have sort of been our incubator for our work from 2019 onwards. So in some ways, and also producing this next show at Grace Cathedral. I know that for me, I've done probably 20 shows there. So a lot of my work has been presented ultimately on that stage. So I know that for me to be where I'm at, I had to have a place to do the work. It's a place I know has gone through so much transition and has had so many folks working for that organization, but they also are pretty consistent in supporting work by folks who look like me. And so I give them their flowers in that moment. And they just bought their building. Yeah. They will be an institution in the making. They're like a baby institution now, I suppose. Yeah, but I was gonna say the church as well. Huh? I was gonna say, okay, I'll say
I'm feeding them.
I will. They're my producer, my live producer. I also think the Church of St. John Coltrane. I was just gonna put them back on the map one more time because I think like I said, I think for me, coming from a jazzy family, a Christian jazzy family, whatever, a jazz background, jazz lineage, and a Christian lineage, they really have figured out how to merge these two really disparate worlds actually into one space. I love them. They also need space. They need more support. They need more money. They currently are in magic theaters like Annex, which is like all the way to Fort Smith. So hard to get to. They had a building for a long time,
actually,
in the Hague. So I feel like I just want them to have a building. I think they need to have like a freaking a full a sign on the street and like people coming in mass. It really is Wild House not gotten any support. It's not kind of boggling to me. So I put them back on. And of course, I'll say for the sake of churches, Glide is down the street from us. We work with Glide currently with Marvin K. White at Glide. We've been going to service. We're also people who are kind of coming back to like attending. We're not identifying as Christian fully, but we are going back to attending church services. And Glide's been the one where we've both cried. Like we have not cried anywhere else. They know how to reach, I think, a wide berth of people.
And they do really important work in the community, in the Tenderloin especially, and with queer folks.
I've been a partner for a long time with Skywatchers, with folks that I've been working with outside of this context. So I give them their flowers. They've just been holding it down in a really tough time in a tough neighborhood.
It's the kind of church I wish I went to when I was a kid.
Exactly.
It would have. Yeah, it might have. Exactly. I might have invested further in the religion if I went to that kind of church.
Yeah, at that time.
Yeah. Shout out to Glide. They're amazing. Love the work that they do. So right now we're going to take a short break. To catch up on previous episodes of The Black Landscape, download on Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to leave a review. 5 stars if you love us. When we come back, we will hear more from Oysterknife. We are back with Chibueze and Gabriele, aka Oysterknife. Now, the first time I saw you two perform under this name, Oysterknife, it was at the Counterpulse. And I don't know if this was the first or second iteration of Mouthful, but it really gave a fusion of, as you said before, of testimony and African indigenous spiritual practices within and without, the Christian church. So how, because now we're doing Mouthful again, but is this same? Is it different? Is it the 5th, 6th, 10th edition? Where are we at?
I mean, I feel like I'll say, we're so inspired by people like Amara Tabor-Smith who talk about episodes, and Ellen Sebastian Chang, for the House Full of Black Women. I think that that piece you saw was our first.
It was the first version.
Iteration. We technically calling this a different show for grant purposes, and also reality. It is a different show.
And to be fair, what you saw was actually a work in progress. I know it was giving a full evening length show because we're crazy, but it was actually a work in progress.
Yes. So since then we've done like so many showings at Dance Mission and something at Grace. So we've done like little pop up like episodes recently that we realize are just all about building up more capacity to tell the story the way we need to for this show, hopefully in February 2nd through 4th at Grace Cathedral. And so this feels like the culmination.
This is like the true final full evening length.
Unless we go on tour, which
Look, listen, speak it into the atmosphere.
Exactly. Thunder, tour, people, we're here. But I think like Gabe said, this is like the actual fully realized version of Mouthful. And, it's going to be exploring similar themes or kind of the same themes of like testimony, African indigenous spiritual practices, syncretic practices as they've developed in the Black church and the ways that the Black church is, both a really intense space for a lot of people, but also a really important space for Black people, and also a place that's very different. Like the way Black people practice Christianity in Black church is different from the rest of the Christian community, at least in the United States.
Absolutely.
Diaspora, for sure. Yeah. And so it's going to have some of those same themes, but this time it's not going to be actually the first time we did have collaborators as well, but we had like 11 different Black and queer collaborators who every night we had the show was a different featured performer. This time we're going to have a set cast. It's us, Marvin K. White, and 3 amazing dancers, Styles Alexander, Tara Bruckner, and Natalia Shoaf. And we're going to have a lot of musical collaborators. We're working with St. John Coltrane Church. We're working with Ex Media Noche, who's a really dope experimental organist. B, aka DJ Blue Moon, who's an incredible musician and artist in their own right, and a ton of other really dope designers who are helping us make an incredible set piece, video, lighting, projections. so many people to name, so I can't name all of them, but if you go on the Counterpulse website, you can see them. And it's going to be at Grace Cathedral, which is the biggest change. We're actually inside a real church. And so for us, I think the big task is how do we bring in these stories that we started talking about in our first version of the show and the different iterations we've done? How do we connect to this really historic and incredibly beautiful space of performance, but also how do we subvert what we're seeing? Like, this is the edifice. This is the Christian church that we are so, affected by. And how do we kind of blacken that space? How do we kind of reclaim that space in our own image and kind of, work with this place, but also expand what it could be in this performance and kind of push beyond the literal confines of that space through the performance, through like kind of an immersive performance. So like all Oysterknife shows, it's going to be immersive. It's going to be multimedia. You're going to be participating. Get ready to move around. Get ready to, do something. And I don't want to say too much more without reviewing it, but please add to what I was saying.
That's great. That was great.
I like what you said, to blacken it up.
Yeah. I think that's something
we got to blacken up more spaces.
Exactly. I think we've been thinking about that a lot with the shows. Like, what is different about the way Black people practice spirituality and specifically Christianity? And I think something we've been thinking about a lot is these two different things. One is this blackening, like how Blackness changes and affects everything that it touches, both like literally in a scientific sense, but also in a cultural sense too. And also this idea of rewilding the church is something we've talked about a lot. Like, how do we kind of, again, reclaim it, but also kind of connect it to, I think you were talking about this, Gabe. Can you explain again what you meant?
Well, we had a sculpture that we were going to have built for this that was built by another artist named Keon Williams, who had to drop out of the project because their amazing career. I'm happy that they're doing their thing. But we were designing this idea of building a God home inside of the church. It's based off of Mbari, which is an Igbo God home, Igbo altar space. And the idea of that thing is it's built out of soil, it's built out of earth materials. And so the church is like so much about like building a space that is separate from the earth somehow. And so the rewilding is how do you bring the earth back into the space? It's stone and like really curated, really polished, really manicured, really painted. How do we bring back the things that actually are where we first found faith? Which is like the earth itself, right?
Yeah. And then connected to that, how do we bring in like our Black indigenous cultures in that way that feels connected to this rewilding that, that those cultures have never really left that space. They've taken new forms. We have, different styles of worship that come from those indigenous African practices, and they're still there. So how do we draw that out? How do we make that more defined? And how do we kind of embrace those things? Because, of course, a lot of Christians, I had someone literally tell me this after we did a performance at Glide, a lot of Christians and Black Christians see that stuff as demonic. And it's like, but this is actually our history and our culture, and this pre-existed Christian practices. Exactly. Before demons even existed, this was something we did. And you're actually still practicing it. You just don't see it that way. The singing, the dancing, the clapping, the way we, are taken by the Spirit, that's all related to like mounting. It's all related to like, spiritual possession, masquerade, the theatricality of church. It's all related to our original ancestral practices, oral history, kind of dazzling with the word spectacle. All of that is related to the ways that Black people and Afro-Diasporic people practice church. So we're trying to draw that out and then also bring our spin to it as Black queer artists, as Oysterknife, and with our cast as well. So
Oh yeah, the Black church can definitely be a spectacle at times. Some people people giving Broadway shows sometimes, child.
Listen. It's a budget. It's like, oh wow, I should be paying $100.
Right. There's so many places where the church has turned into the club. It's turned into a stage theater with Hamilton style shows. I'm like, y'all doing all this, but then have an issue with block people with a Q.
Exactly.
Coming in there trying to get their worship on too, which is a whole nother thing. We're not going to go down that tangent, but that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother conversation, but.
No, but I'm glad you brought it up because those two things, like, again, church has been a refuge for Black queer people. They've always been in the church. They've been the deacons. They've been the preachers. They've been the church aunties, the organists. The
music directors.
Black queer people are very part of that space. But ironically, we also feel the least safe in those spaces. So that's another goal of our show is to how do we create a space where Black queer people feel safe in this church space that we're entering into literally and that we're also kind of creating through our work. And then the other thing I'm so glad you brought up is church's club, because I've literally seen that. I saw the other day on Instagram, some church in Atlanta did a New Year's Eve club party thing in the church, I guess to kind of keep people away from the bad influences. But I'm bringing up club to say that another thinking about in the show is how do Black people and people in general, but especially Black people, find church in other spaces outside the church, like in club spaces, in gatherings with each other, in creative spaces. Especially as queer people, I feel like we are used to finding sanctuary in each other and finding sanctuary in unusual spaces or in spaces that are considered, I don't know, shadowy or like not mainstream or whatever. And the club is one of those spaces. House music is one of those spaces. It's that place where, you know, people really feel like they get saved on the dance floor. There's a reason we say that. It's a spiritual experience. And so we're trying to bring in that kind of queer understanding of, you know, church can be anywhere. Church can be in the unexpected place too. And that includes the club. So I'm glad you brought those up because it's definitely relevant to what we're doing.
Absolutely. And you know, the word says if two or more gather.
Thank you. I am there.
In his name. Okay. We there.
Exactly. Yes. There's so many queer readings of Christianity that I think Marvin K. White especially has been such a great support and such a great resource for us. And how do we look at the Bible and reframe and read in between the lines to find the interpretations that are actually useful and relevant to us? One of the things that he said to us that really blew my mind and was kind of like an opening for this piece when we first started writing with him for the show is he was talking about the 10 Commandments. And he was like, well, you know, the first of the 10 Commandments says, you shall have no other God but me. And to me, that first commandment reveals that God is acknowledging that there are other gods. But I just want to be the one that, you know, I want you to worship. So even that is like such an incredible reading of the Bible and acknowledging the fact that there are other indigenous cosmologies, other indigenous spiritualities that are still present in the readings of the Bible, in the ways we talk about Christianity. It's just that, you know, in the mainstream sense, in the conservative, especially white evangelical influence of church, we tend to erase that. But it is there. It is in the Bible too. We just have to look for it and find it. So we're trying to find it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And Jesus was a diva himself.
Listen, a diva.
He was out here flipping tables, snapping on people like
hanging out with sex workers, hanging out with the poor.
Hanging out with sex workers, the poor, thieves, robbers, gossips, all of that.
Exactly. All of that. And he was, I really love the message of seeing Jesus as like a Palestinian revolutionary. That's what he was, a Jewish Palestinian revolutionary. You know, he would be fighting, you know, right now, like without getting too much into that, he would be on the front lines too, because that's the kind of, you know, prophet he was, you know? So yeah, there's a much more radical reading of Jesus, I think, the deeper you get into it. And especially
he was definitely a frontline prophet.
Listen, yeah, exactly. So we're kind of trying to channel that understanding of him too, that he's not just this white dude who was like, I don't know, what is it? Turn the other cheek. That wasn't his only message. That wasn't even his main message, you know?
And he wasn't white. Like,
he wasn't white.
So I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole nother conversation. But my Jesus is Black. He got locks and he be swinging them.
Exactly. And if you go to John Coltrane Church, they got a huge, beautiful Byzantine style mural of Black Jesus with locks. So that is the Jesus that we're talking
to. Well, I thank you both so much for chatting with me. It's been great having you here.
It's great being here.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait to see you at the show, hopefully.
Yes, please.
Yes. So drop the show information one more time.
Sure thing. So Mouthful will premiere February 2nd at 7:30. We have 2 more shows after that, February 3rd at 7:30 and February 4th at 7, all at Grace Cathedral, which is at 1100 California Street in San Francisco at the top of, I guess it's Nob Hill. Closest BART would be the Powell Street Station, take a bus. And we're excited to show this. It's about an hour and a half long show.
No late seating.
So get there on time.
And so no CP time.
No,
unfortunately, I mean, we wish we could, but no. We want to make sure you get the full experience.
Yes, doors open 50 minutes beforehand, and also we'll be meeting. Just important to say, we'll be meeting in the side of the church, not the front door. So when you get there, just know
there'll be a sign.
And it'll be the side of the church.
And 2 more things to add quickly is we are still figuring out our ASL interpretation dates and our audio description dates, but it'll potentially be on the 4th. But we will share that more with people as we book that. But we will have audio description and we will have American Sign Language services for 1 night each so that we can reach our deaf and visually impaired community.
And tell the audience where they can find you and book you.
Sure. We have an email.
Yes.
Oysterknifeperformance@gmail.com is how you reach us. We have an Instagram, Oysterknife.
It's _Oysterknife_.
That's right. And we also, we do have some things coming up in the summer. Thankfully, we work We choreograph for theater shows. We perform our own work.
We curate. We co-direct. We also collaborate
multi-hyphenates
to develop their work. And we are also fiscally sponsored artists of Counterpulse. So if you want to make a tax-deductible donation, you can go to the Counterpulse website, look us up, and make a donation there. And you can also go on the Counterpulse website to register for our workshops that are happening January 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th. There's information about all those
Black Benedictions
on the Counterpulse website. And you can also buy tickets for our show on the website.
Wonderful. Thank you all again so much for being here.
Thank you for having us, Andrea.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, and those links will be in our show notes. Tap in and support Block and Black creativity. Thank all of you out there for listening and supporting another season. Again, leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts or in the comments of our social media. This has been another episode of The Black Landscape with Andrea Spearman, where Black excellence is always trending.